G'day mates of YouTube, Indiana Iron here, and I'm just wrapping up some expeditions and I'm come inside to have a discussion about power creep in 3.15 Expedition League. Come on, we're going on an adventure. Let's chat about it today. About a week ago, Grinding Gear Games released this beautiful graph right here that you can see highlighted on your screen moving around. And this beautiful, wonderful graph is representative that players have no doubt gotten more powerful in Path of Exile over the last several years. That is not in dispute. I don't know a single player who has played and posted, whether that's on YouTube, whether that's on Twitch, whether that's on Reddit, whether that's on the official forums, whether that's on a Discord. I have not seen anywhere a player claiming to have been a Path of Exile player at any point in time previous to now that would say that players have lost power or have maintained player power over any length of period of time. Anyone who's played Path of Exile for more than a single league, if you've played for more than a single patch, you've no doubt seen and experienced and can validate and in some ways verify what Grinding Gear Games is trying to communicate with this graph right here, that player power relative to the rest of the game, to monsters, to difficulty, to challenges, to encounters, that player power has grown, all right, with each expansion, with each league, and with each patch. We can debate and we can discuss, and I'm happy to do that today if y'all want to, down below in the comments. We can discuss like which particular leagues or which particular patches have essentially added or contributed the most to this particular current issue of power creep in POE. We can absolutely debate that. That's not going to be the focus of my discussion today. That's not going to be the focus of what I want to chat about, because primarily, well, that to me, it's an interesting historical discussion, but that's not where we're at in the moment. So I'm happy to review that in the future. But in the moment, let's get into why players have grown. Like, what is it about players and their particular experience, their particular characters in relationship to the challenges and the content that comes out with each patch and with each league and with each expansion. What is it that is the primary contributing factor to why players have gotten more powerful? That's the question that we're asking today. Why have players grown in power in Path of Exile over the last few years? What's the answer? What is the contributing factor? What's the reason? Right? We've all got lots of different layers. We could say it's particular currencies that have been added into the game. It's particular passive nodes that have been updated. It's ascendancy reworks or ascendancies even being added to the game. Shout out to anybody who actually remembers back before there were ascendancies. Like, there's a lot of different factors of why players have grown in power in Path of Exile over the last few years. But I want to put forward a single primary reason for why players have grown in power in Path of Exile over the last several years. And then I would like to use an illustration or an analogy to hopefully explain what is, in general, what is this constant tension in the Path of Exile community right now? What's the dissonance or the resonance going on between players and developers, and even between different pockets of players inside the POE community? So I've got one primary factor, one primary thing, one foundational causative thing that is causing players to grow in player power. All right, above my slightly expeditionary forehead, you can see it's Grinding Gear Games. That's the reason why players have grown in power. We can all say, oh, well, it's this patch or that patch, or players have even learned how to develop and share different ideas about characters and progression and develop strategies for taking on content, which, by the way, Grinding Gear Games tried to include that in the discussion. Like, hey, players have learned how to play our game better over the years. That's part of the reality of designing games with the internet as being a massively adopted means of communication, is that players can share their information with one another about how they're tackling stuff. All that being said, Grinding Gear Games is the reason why players have grown in power creep. You and I haven't designed Harvest League. You and I didn't design all of the various things that have come along with ascendancies and with currencies and with itemization and with influences and with particular ways of farming the Atlas, or particular ways of farming particular bosses. or particular interesting mechanics between cluster jewels or between uniques or between passives or between simple interactions between gems that may or may not have been intended from the get-go. The reason why players have grown in power for years, I need to really emphasize this. So I hope you guys are getting, I hope you don't feel like I'm shouting at you today. I'm shouting at you. Like, I hope you don't think that I'm shouting at you today. I'm just trying to emphasize here the reason why players have power in Path of Exile is because the game developer designers have given us access to the level of power that we have. So if we take a look at this graph and we say, wow, player power has really gone up a lot over the last couple of years, Grinding Gear Games, as they're looking at this and they go, oh, gee golly willikers, look at the player power. This has gone on far too long and we need to correct it. All right? I'm with you. If that is completely in Grinding Gear Games' interest. They're the developers of the game. They have creative license, creative authority. If they say we want the game to go to a state where players do not have as much player power, it is 100%, I firmly believe it is 100% their prerogative to do so. It's our prerogative as a community to give feedback or to say we don't like this or to even stop playing the game. If the game's no longer fun, don't play it. But it is still nonetheless their prerogative. It's their game, their project. They're the ones who work on it. It's their daily living. Like those of us, whether we're casual or whether we're super hardcore and even play the game as a job, which many people do, it's these people's job to make the game. So they get to have the biggest say and they do all of the work in creating the game. So that leads me back to why have players grown in power over the last several years? Because Grinding Gear Games has designed and desired for players to grow in this level of power. Remember back when Synthesis was released and how OP it was supposedly for the levels of crafting that it was, and the explanation for killing Synthesis, one of the many explanations that was given because that was attached to Synthesis's removal, synthesized? Between Synthesis. The reason why Synthesis didn't go core was partially because of the player power that it unlocked with some crafting. And then here we are a few years later and we get Harvest, which is by far stronger than Synthesis. Anyway, so this is an ongoing, the only reason why I bring up Synthesis and compare it to Harvest, that this is a timeline discussion, a long, ongoing, seemingly internal discussion that Grinding Gear Games is having in the tension between player power and player creep and deciding whether or not to increase it. Like at different points in time, Grinding Gear Games has decided, nope, this mechanic that we've released has allowed too much player power and we don't want it to go core. And then there are other times where they go, hey, this is going core and we want to keep it. So that's kind of strange to me. If the vision of the game is for the game to be not as dominated by player power creep, then whose responsibility is it to rein that in? Grinding Gear Games. It's GGG's responsibility. They're the ones who are designing the game. They're the ones who are responsible for giving access to players for the amount of power that we've got. And so it's also on them to correct that if they see that as a problem for their own design space moving forward. Now, I want to get into the community responses and reactions to this. I'm not going to break it down based on factions or like different representative ideas. In other words, different groups of players who have got different ideas and reactions and responses. That's what I would call factions in this case, amongst the community. I'm not going to represent each and every one. I'm simply going to use an analogy here to try to illustrate what's going on in the community. And the illustration may or may not be silly. You guys can play along if you'd like. Power creep in Path of Exile is like my kids eating cereal. That's our illustration. So imagine it's a wonderful, beautiful morning. The birds are chirping outside nicely. The sun rises up. It's got a smile on its face. And then all around you, the world just seems to glow. There's mist coming across the fields. The grass has got dew upon it. And children are frolicking and skipping and happily jumping from their bedrooms saying, "Good morning, Father and Mother Draconis. It's so nice to see you. My goodness, could I please have a bowl of cereal?" Power creep and POE is like my kids eating cereal. And on Monday, I decide, yes, my children, I'll give you some Cocoa Krispies, which according to some article that I found by typing into Google, this is it makes a top 10 list of like most sugary cereals. Okay, so on Monday, I give my kids Cocoa Crisp. By the way, I am in no way, shape, or form affiliated or sponsored by any kind of breakfast company or any company at all. All of the opinions expressed in today's illustration are solely those of a balding Templar cosplaying as Iron Draconis. All right, so Cocoa Krispies. That's what I give my kids on Monday. It's got some sugar in it. They like it, they enjoy it, and they move on. Tuesday comes along, and what happens? My kids come out frolicking and skipping from their bedrooms, a wonderful night sleeping, and saying, "Oh, Daddy, could we please have some cereal?" And I say, yes. I'm going to give you some corn pops today, because Tuesday's great. You guys liked that cereal last time. Why not get you some more of that sugary cereal? Then Wednesday comes along, and we give you even more sugary cereal, some crunch berries. Then Thursday comes along, and I go, you know what? I'm going to give you some honey graham O's. I don't personally think I've ever eaten those before, but apparently they're higher in their sugar content than Krispies, Corn Pops, and Crunch Berries. And then finally, Friday comes along, and the kids come out and they say, "Oh, Daddy, we'd like something with marshmallows in it." So I say, "Okay, I'll get you some Fruit Loops, some marshmallow Fruit Loops." And by this point in time throughout the week, my kids have had Cocoa Krispies, Corn Pops, Crunch Berries, O's, and now Fruit Loops marshmallows. Saturday comes along, and I go, you know what? It's Saturday. Why don't I indulge you guys? And I'll get you some Honey Smacks, which apparently have the single highest sugar count out of all of these cereals on this one particular website's ranking list. I don't know if this is factual in any way. The point is, all week long, I have escalated my children's interaction with their sugar intake for breakfast, right? I'm giving them more and more sugar cereal. You can replace this with ice cream, anything else, right? You can make it a silly analogy, and I grant you, it is a silly analogy. But then finally, on Sunday, I go, hey guys, how about if we have some oatmeal? Oatmeal? Yeah, you know. Where's the Cocoa Crisps? Where's the Corn Pops? Daddy, where's the marshmallow Fruit Loops? My original vision for breakfast was oatmeal. No brown sugar, no sugar at all, no fruit alongside it for natural sugar, just cooked oatmeal. That's my original vision for breakfast. And I'm so sorry if you liked the sugar. And I'm so sorry if the last week all I've done is pump you up with expectations of sugar. Because my actual vision for breakfast was oatmeal. Those of you who have kids, imagine if that was the parenting that you did. What would your kids do? You're setting up and you're building expectations for one thing, and then you're actually meeting those expectations with a different reality. Of course, there's going to be resistance. Of course, there's going to be pushback. Now, as for me personally, I like cereal and oatmeal, but I also like slow POE. I like hardcore POE. I like solo self-found POE. I also like the economy. I play Trade League. I like softcore, and I like playing builds that die a whole lot. All play either one of these visions, whether it's a slow and steady, difficult, grindy, really challenging, taxing on your mana and on your skills and on your ability to problem solve your character. I'll play that POE. I grew up playing POE that way. That was how I was introduced to POE. It used to be that softcore was called scrubcore, and I played amongst not elite in terms of gameplay style. Those of you who have watched me play know I am nowhere close to being elite. But I played amongst players who were elitist in their mindset that hardcore was the proper way to play Path of Exile. That was the designed, intended experience. So I'll play that and I'll enjoy it. I'll also play softcore Trade League and just play meme builds and play all sorts of fun, really, really fast builds and interact with the economy and rake up a whole bunch of currency and do whatever it is that I want to do in that. I'll play either oatmeal or I'll play cereal because I enjoy both, right? So don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying I'm leaving POE either way. I enjoy POE. I got 4 kids and too much work to do. I enjoy POE for being a video game. But I also can understand and experience frustration when expectations and reality don't meet. So If Grinding Gear Games, if we as a whole gaming community that are experiencing Path of Exile, if we know that the developers are aiming for oatmeal, like if we're aiming for oatmeal, then the only thing I can say is then don't cave in and give us sugar cereal. One of the first pieces of feedback that we got in a discussion about 3.15, about patch notes, about the manifesto, was from a wonderful longtime community member here in G3 who simply said, you know, Iron, I really think that these are going to be some long-time commitments and some stands taken by GGG, and we're going to see these nerfs continue into 3.16 and 3.17 and 3.18. This is just the start. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If 3.15 is truly the tip of the iceberg, then I applaud Grinding Gear Games. I want to say, great. You guys have stuck with your vision. You truly believe that the power creep curve on your bar graph is a problem, and you're designing to fix it. Where I get frustrated personally as a player, and as someone who, as a casual hobby, who does not play this game for a living, as somebody who just plays this game for a hobby, something that frustrates me is hearing the words that Grinding Gear Games says and then seeing the things that Grinding Gear Games designs and does. If Grinding Gear Games is looking and trying to design a slow, gritty, challenging game, then they need to release content that is that. If they're looking to make a game that includes a whole bunch of different players from a wide variety and a wide spectrum, and they really want to show off zoom gameplay, and they really want to evaluate and want players to evaluate their gameplay by currency per hour and the amount of min-maxing that they can do, not just the amount of character growth, but character min-maxing. If that's what they're aiming for, then they need to aim for that. My fear is, as with every single patch with Grinding Gear Games, that they'll make a statement, that they'll release content, that there's feedback given about that content, and then there's a response to that feedback, which isn't in line with the original stated design goals that we got prior to the content being released. That's where I get frustrated, because the communication set expectations at one spot, and then the experienced reality doesn't match up. That's frustrating. If we're aiming for oatmeal, don't feed us marshmallow-covered Honey Smack Fruit Loops with crunch berries on the side. I personally have really enjoyed playing 3.15 so far. I'm taking it at a snail's pace. I've had way too much work to do over the weekend, and so I'm enjoying the gameplay that I'm getting to play. It's giving me a big old nostalgia trip from back when I used to play, like during Essence, or even pre-3.5, pre-Oriath. Like, there's a lot of different things that I like about Path of Exile, even in its current state. I was actually debating if I'm going to maybe play hardcore even this league. Like, if we're going elitist, I'll go elitist. I'll go play hardcore and just be a masochist and lose characters left and right. And there's some enjoyment level to that. But again, from a design perspective, if the power bar graph is a problem, the only people to blame for that particular power graph is Grinding Gear Games. They're the ones who's designing content. They're the ones who's releasing content. They're the ones who are releasing cluster jewels. They're the one who's releasing leagues that have got timers upon timers upon timers. If Path of Exile is a game that is meant to be played at a particular pace, then don't give tools that can go and exceed that particular pace. It's that simple. Thanks so much for joining us for today's discussion. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd love to hear down below in the comments what you think about power creep in Path of Exile. Do you play POE for a fantasy OP power trip, right? That's what a lot of players have been playing over the last several leagues, is to go zoom, to be overpowered, to blow things up in an instant and have these like demigod style bosses just bowing down and falling over and dropping all sorts of currency and drops for you. But that's not everybody. Maybe you play Path of Exile for a more gritty, punishing, harsh gaming experience where you want to be overcoming challenges and solving problems with your character's growth, itemization, and progression. Let me know down in the comments which style you appreciate. And of course, any other feedback, comments, or suggestions that you've got to contribute to the discussion are always welcome. If you've enjoyed today's discussion, then you can of course like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions just like this one all throughout the 3.15 Expedition League. As always, I hope that today is the day a Mayor of Calandra drops for you. If you'd like any more information about the topics we chatted about today, links are provided down below in the video description. The G3 community has grown a ton over the last several years, and that's thanks to viewers like you and faithful Patreon supporters. Big shout out to longtime supporters and first-time supporters for this month.